Live. Good evening. Good
Hey!
evening, everyone. How y'all doing tonight? This is Tom Bear Pigman, and I believe we're recording to Twitch. Yep, there we go. And I'm joined here tonight by Jay, Backlist on Twitter, and Avery, Living X Paradox on Twitter. And this is our first episode of our, as of yet, untitled podcast, gaming podcast. I think the initial title, working title we came up with was like just "fuck Persona 4" or something like that. I don't think we
Yeah,
came up with anything better, so fuck it. We'll come up with something. We'll come up with something good later on, but for right now,
I
you know,
quite like FP4.
yeah.
yeah, FP4. I like that. FP4. Okay, we'll stick with that.
Okay,
Alright,
sounds
good
good.
talk.
Good talk. Good talk.
But yes.
Okay, so basically, I'm just gonna be streaming Tohovania 2 here in the background while we discuss near and dear topic to all of us with PT coming out, with news of the Resident Evil 1080p remake, The Evil Within. Is survival horror making a comeback? Like a real comeback? Because for a while, survival horror really took kind of a backseat to action horror. Like pretty much since let's see, when do you guys think like the break happened? I think it was when Resident Evil 4 like
Yeah.
started becoming like game of all years.
I think
Yeah.
it was the development of over the shoulder for survival horror that really did it with Resident Evil 4. I mean, for one, it gave the game less of a survival horror feeling and more of a Call of Duty, first person shooter sort of thing. A lot of people
Yeah.
went into Resident Evil 4 expecting, well, previous Resident Evils, and most importantly, Code Veronica, Resident Evil 2, which we do not hear much about, um, and got, Leon's wacky adventures with many guns and many Spaniards.
Yeah, that was definitely the thing I remembered, and especially for me because it was literally right on the eve of when Resident Evil remake and Zero, which a lot of people didn't like. Fuck it, I still liked it. Um, those two games I really feel kind of perfected the tank control um, Resident Evil game, particularly remake. Like I was so pumped to play that, and I'm like, if they could do that with an existing story, like I can't wait to see what they do for something new, like a new Resident Evil game in this style. And then 4 came out, and people people kind of they thought 4 was they kind of confused difficult with scary because
Yeah.
second you get the shotgun, 4 is not a scary game, and you're really not in danger of dying at all. Leon is more than prepared for the challenges at hand. So, contrast that with the beginning of Resident Evil 3, where you are just so. There are so many zombies, and Jill has so few weapons.
Running across ammo is like incredibly rare in RE3 and 2.
Running across ammo, what's that?
Yeah, seriously, and that's really a defining characteristic of survival horror. You're not supposed to feel prepared.
And 4, like, I just. Okay, enemies have one hit kills. Aside from that, where is the. I'd argue it doesn't start getting, like, scary until the Plagas come in, and doesn't start getting difficult until the last couple of chapters. But by then, you have so many guns and so many grenades that. When do you feel in danger?
I mean, really, the only time I ever felt endangered in Resident Evil 4 was when the regenerators were introduced, and that was that was, you know, the scariest part of the game because you had to use, you know, at first you didn't even have your infrared sensor, you had to just go in blind. Then you finally get your infrared sensor and you don't feel threatened because it's like, what, 5 targets that you have to shoot until they explode into itty-bitty pieces? You're not really threatened by that much anymore. So the scariness didn't even last.
God bless.
You're tight over there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and ironically enough, like, the regenerators are the enemies that, up till that point, like, no enemy kind of reminded me of the, really of the, like, tyrants or any enemy from Resident Evil 2, and that one, like, kind of when it started feeling like a Resident Evil game again, but it was only for, you know, more than 3/4 of the way through the game.
Yeah, by that time you're like, okay, I wish I had gotten this a little earlier so I could have actually been scared, but instead I got Leon's QTE adventure action, which is fine and all, but, you know.
The only other real time in Resident Evil 4 that I started feeling, like, scared and, you know, was, it, or, whatever Salazar's bodyguards are. And surprise, surprise, they're the enemies that look the most like Mr. X or Nemesis.
Yeah. I just really, really wish that Resident Evil 4... I mean, I love Resident Evil 4, as you know, it's one of my favorite games of all time, but Resident Evil 4 definitely did cause the deviation from survival horror to action horror, survival action.
I wouldn't even argue horror. Horror doesn't even factor into it for me. Like, Dead Space is action horror because it does the horror element really well. Resident Evil 4 kind of doesn't even do the horror element like at all. It's, to me, Resident Evil 4 is an action game, and it is a good action game. I thought Resident Evil 4 was a fantastic game, but just an atrocious horror game.
Maybe.
The thing about Resident Evil 4, I think, is that it's a lot more accessible.
Yeah.
It
Savory.
Huh?
Thank you.
For the ringtone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, I mean, it just really made it a lot more accessible to people. I mean, that was my first Resident Evil game was 4, and it was easier to get into because you really didn't need the first few games in order to get into it, because it starts a completely new plot, even though it's still sort of related.
Yeah.
It starts a new plot, and it just makes it a lot easier. And then the fact that what you guys were saying before about the ammo being easily accessible also makes it a lot more accessible.
Mm.
I really love it. That's the problem. I can't hate what it's done. But...
But on the same hand, like, they sacrifice, like, that true survival horror feeling for accessibility.
Yeah.
I remember saying to myself, I'm having a fun time, but this is not, like... I remember saying to myself, like, the Resident Evil game that I kind of saw... When I played Remake, I saw to myself, like, they are going to make an incredible game out of this engine. They're going to do something, like, revolutionary with this. And the second I started playing 4, I'm like, that dream is dead. We're never getting that game.
Oh yeah. It's really sad too, because I feel like we have the potential to bring Resident Evil back. I mean, with the introduction of the remake happening now, it's like, this could be it. This could be what the Resident Evil franchise needed. But I hate saying that, because every time I say that, something awful happens.
I still contend that Revelations was the perfect marriage between 4's action and you know, the remake and 2's like it felt like horror, because it made the enemies, you know, all of a sudden this like control scheme that complements a super actiony game, you have enemies that kind of need you to have that level of accuracy, and you're fighting these otherworldly, like, you're fighting enemies that make the like regenerators look like nothing.
Yeah. Oh man, Revelations was so great, and I mean, I played it on the 3DS, which means I only got like half the experience I feel like I should have had.
I'll argue. I thought it was actually really good for the 3DS, because it's the kind of game that you really want to play in burst.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it had a chapter select mode, right?
Once you beat it, it had a kind of like its version of Mercenaries.
Yeah. I think that's what made it really appropriate for handheld consoles, as opposed to
I just thought the chapter select feature was the best thing it could have done.
Yeah, definitely. To make the gameplay more accessible, to make it more appropriate to handheld consoles, I think that a lot of people who are, new to, I guess, shooters on the 3DS or looking for, like, a different type of 3DS game would really enjoy Revelations, which was a nice boost for the Resident Evil franchise, as opposed to, well, 6.
There was so...
From Revelation into, 5 and 6, to compare the current gen, what you call it, or previous gen installments.
Yeah.
There was so much potential in Revelations, and then they had that CGI movie that was also really good.
Yeah.
And then 6 came out, and all of a sudden I lost all hope.
Because 6 was trying to be an action film. It wasn't trying to be a Resident Evil game. And even, well, shout out to Matt Mercer for doing... Well, I know your opinions on his Leon versus RE4 Leon, but I think that the gruffiness of his performance in RE6 actually brought that nice, like, sort of survival feeling.
The only Leon I like is Resident Evil 2 Leon. I didn't even like 4.
Fair enough. Again, it's a matter of, like, really delivering with performance, and a lot of the delivery in voice acting in that game, and the combination of the game not maintaining a consistent tone, and it was just all over the place with everything.
It really tried to do too much, and it kind of, what's the parable? I chased 2 rabbits and I lost both of them.
That's actually, yep, that's pretty much accurate, because you start out RE6 and most people go immediately to Leon and Helena's path, and it's a nice introductory. You think you're getting into survival horror. You start out, it's a very survival horror feeling. It brings you back to, RE2 and original Resident Evil in terms of, like, scarce ammo and etc. And then you start with explosions and dinosaurs and mobsters, and just so much weird shit happens in that game. It's really, really strange.
See, I started playing Leon and Helena's story, and I was bored as shit.
You didn't like it?
No, I cared about none of the characters. There were. I got to a point where you had to, like, I think, defend a storefront, and there were like 10 people, 10 characters in there with you, and I knew nothing about any of them, and I didn't care about any of them. Even Helena, I know next to nothing about, and she's supposed to be a main character.
That is true. It does, as much as I like Helena, it does feel like they shafted her in exchange for Ada and Leon's, relationship development, which went nowhere, mind you.
The Resident Evil fanbase cannot get enough of Ada, and after 4, like, yeah.
It really is. I mean, I love Ada, but Jesus Christ, like, she doesn't need to appear in every single game to define a Resident Evil game. It's a little ridiculous.
I like the, side story they gave her in 4, where you could play as her, and then after that, it's kind of like, really, what more can we learn from this character? But, getting back on track,
sorry about that.
when, I kind of completely lost hope in never having another like actual survival horror game. Even Revelations, as much as I loved it because it married the action aspect better to horror. You know, making it kind of more of like a Dead Space
Yeah.
than a Resident Evil 5 or 6. But I gotta say, I for the first time in a while, I'm actually pretty hopeful in what um I think we're finally seeing kind of a resurgence of
Survival horror.
survival, like actual survival horror. The PT
I think
demo blew me away.
I would
In
argue that it's just a resurgence of horror in general.
it's a different kind though. It's
Like, not action horror. I think it's what we're seeing is a resurgence, a move away from action horror and towards, like, you know, more towards survival horror, more towards psychological horror. Because, I mean, I watched the 2 hour and 16 minutes that the girl played when she first discovered the hidden trailer at the end, and it seemed a lot more psychological than survival.
it earned its jump scares, and that is about the best compliment I can give to a horror game.
Because jump scares are often poorly
Shh.
executed.
They're cheap. They are,
Yeah,
you know, you can go on Newgrounds and look up any like there are hundreds of these really shitty
Jump scares.
yeah, jump scare, like the Arise series is a perfect example of just how many JPEGs of Halloween masks can we put in while we play the soundtrack to Saw.
Yeah, like, it's really not. I think the last jump scare that really got me was the Boys of Silence in Bioshock Infinite.
Mm-hmm.
That one was great. You turn around from the command console, you're not really expecting it, you're ready to go on, and you shit your pants. It's great. I don't know, I felt like that one really got me. I wasn't really, you know, expecting to randomly see a Boy of Silence in front of me.
and of course it's one of those things where you spent the entire level trying to avoid them, and
yeah.
then suddenly there's no way to avoid it. I mean,
Exactly.
I've replayed that mission a couple of times now, and it always gets me, no matter what, even knowing that it was coming.
It's the combination of the sound, the screaming, and I mean, we've all
Yeah.
seen screamers before, but
Yeah, but that was a very, very nicely put jump scare.
yes.
The only one that got me beforehand was was Outlast, and even then, I actually really liked Outlast. I thought I was going to hate it when I played it for the first time, mostly because like your character kind of reacts to everything. How can I put this? It's like I hate when a game has to make the loud, like to me, a game having to make the loud noise in the screamer is a sign that it has no faith in its own horror.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's like a laugh track for a sitcom. It's the making
Yeah.
having audio to tell you when to be scared. And I'm reminded of an RPG Maker horror game I played around Halloween this year, Mermaid Swamp. And the most notable thing about that game, it was a mediocre game otherwise, the story really wasn't that great, but the thing I really, like, took home from that one was almost every jump scare was silent. There were almost no loud noises, so what you would be doing is you'd be walking around exploring a mansion, all of a sudden a half-second jump cut to either an eyeball or a disturbing face, but because there's no audio like scream that goes along with it, I had to it kind of woke me up and was like, did I just imagine that or did that happen? It made it way creepier than it really should have been. But Outlast got me because it made the guy scream. And to me, I'm like, okay, that's a little cheap, but
To be fair, I mean, I just started playing Outlast. I got it on Steam, and the character kind of lends himself to it. He's kind of an unassuming reporter coming to investigate this place. And so he kind of seems like the type to get scared easily, but I do agree, it kind of cheapens the effect.
Yeah, like I said, I eventually ended up really liking it. The only problem I have with Outlast is I thought the ending was really stupid.
Have have you played the DLC yet? Because I've heard that's actually even better than the original game.
I am not a huge fan of it, to be honest.
Okay.
It makes the same, like, the thing I really liked about Outlast was um it varied up, like, the threat. Like, the thing I liked most about Outlast was you really can't tell who is the enemy, who are your enemies, and who are just, like, normal people who happen to be there. And so you have, like, the people who want to the cannibals who want to try and eat you, but they still sound really refined, so it kind of messes with your expectation. Every single character in Whistleblower has the same threat. They're gonna cut your dick off.
Yeah.
And that can it reaches the point where it's like, it doesn't even feel offensive, it feels lazy.
I've read reviews about this game. I have yet to play it, but that's the main thing I always remember about this game is that every character threatens to chop your dick off. It's like a characteristic of the game that no one can get past. And to me, it does seem like they kind of shove it in your face and go, guys, be scared. But then, you have people who don't have dicks who maybe don't know that fear. Like, you have this thing called females, which I know
what
is
females?
hard. I know.
Is that another species? Have we discovered another species, you guys?
Is that a horror game? Are women a horror game?
Yes.
Women are the revival of survival horror.
But I mean, like, you take Outlast regular and Avery, I don't know if you've gotten to the part where have you gotten to the part with the giant scissors yet?
Not yet. I literally just started. I got like 30 minutes into it.
Okay, so I won't say anything about that, but there's basically, like, a part where, like, there are parts in that game that made me cringe, and, like, I really liked that it had several different kinds of enemies, and you had the one gigantic guy basically chasing you around the entire time, and the ending gets a little supernatural without spoiling anything. It gets unnecessarily supernatural when the rest of the game had been really, fear of the humans. But I thought it was a very relatable game for anybody. Like, you didn't even have to really have, And then the DLC, I don't know, it kind of lost me. But even Outlast, which I thought was still really great, it's still, the only reason why I don't really count Outlast as horror, and I might have to revise this, because when I played it on PC, it had no difficulty settings. It was just like one difficulty mode. And then I played the PS4 version, which has now tons of difficulty. But my biggest complaint with Outlast was you had if you played your game right, you would never, ever, ever run low on batteries. Ever. You were never in danger. If you got killed, there were no penalty for death. You would just start off with your batteries refilled. So it's like, okay, you made this really scary environment and you took away any, kind of the complaint I had with the Machine for Pigs. Only,
God.
I have to admit, I'm not, like, after Amnesia, we were having a trend of, games that you don't have any combat in. Which I like and I don't like at the same time, because if you can scare someone while they have weapons, I think that's a better version of horror than scaring someone when they don't have weapons, if they don't have a viable way of defending themselves.
It
I'm looking at you, Evil Within.
I actually prefer it with weapons. I not that I
Me
like
too.
combat, but when you have no weaponry and everyone kind of starts off from a blank slate of, oh well, I'm not meant to have any weapons, so I know I can get out of this.
Yeah,
But
but
if you have a
if
gun and you just have no ammo for it, that's really unnerving. That's really scary.
exactly, and then it adds a level of strategy, as in like, oh shit, I have to conserve my ammo, and then they also end up upping the AI a bit because of it. Um, and so you have more threats coming at you, and you realize I need to watch myself, you know. And I mean, it's people. The main argument for games without combat is it's realistic, but it's also realistic for you to grab a 2x4 to try to start hitting someone, you know?
Yeah. It is much scarier to have someone confront their fear than
Yeah.
to avoid their fear, and that was my big issue with Shattered Memories.
Oh, yeah. I was
I
Yeah.
just about to name drop that.
I love Shattered Memories. Don't get me wrong. I actually really enjoyed that game, but
Yeah.
It's very intuitive.
my only complaint
It
with
didn't.
that, my only complaints with that game were it did not need to be a remake.
Yeah.
Um,
Although I do have to admit, I actually kind of like the fact, like, it was a remake and it wasn't, if that makes sense.
It was almost like a reboot.
yeah.
A DC style
It's a
reboot.
lot more. It's a lot more like a rebuild rather than a.
I don't think it
It's
needed it.
rebuild.
I don't
It's
think it
Silent
needed
Hill.
it either.
It's Silent Hill rebuild in
That's
Ava terms.
horrifying. I never want to hear that phrase again. Jesus Christ.
See, I don't think it needed that. I think it would have been really. I think the story would have stood up enough on its own as its own
Yeah.
game. I don't think it needed to have that. I don't think it needed to have that.
Yeah, it didn't need to name drop. Like, you could honestly change the names of the characters and basically have a completely different game that a lot of people would enjoy a lot more.
I like the way that they kind of interpreted some Silent Hill characters, but again, it was a, and I've noticed this with a lot of Silent Hill games, and it's one of the reasons why I love PT so much.
Yeah.
The biggest issue with Silent Hill games has been this need to hold on to nostalgia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has definitely shackled the series down. It's people complaining that they basically want them to make another Silent Hill 2. I don't want them to make another Silent Hill 2.
No.
We have a Silent Hill 2, and it's great. We truly do not need to make another one. And we have the series that desperately needs innovation. And we're not getting any of it because, Downpour has to have all these references to Silent Hill in a game that absolutely does not need it. Origins. Origins wouldn't. You physically can't remove the nostalgia from it. It's built into the story, and it ultimately hurts it. Same for Shattered Memory. I think either of them needed to rely on that nostalgia, and it ultimately hurt them. It made them worse games because of it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, PT, I'm playing through that demo, and I'm like, this feels like no Silent Hill game I've ever played, and that's what's gonna make it a great Silent Hill game.
Exactly, because you can't keep remaking the same game over and over again.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, what Capcom realized with Resident Evil, and then also fucked up, excuse my language, really badly. Like, really badly with RE4, RE5, and RE6. I know they were trying to take survival horror to the new level. That's kind of what they sold it as back when RE4 got released, but it was like a completely different game when people picked it up. So I don't really, I'm not against evolution of games and genres, but goodness gracious.
I'm all for innovation,
Yeah.
especially when like
Plots.
Team Silent has been gone. for a while now.
Don't make me cry now.
Team Silent is.
Oh.
Rest in peace.
It,
Well,
it honestly, the Silent Hill fan base feels like a guy who can't get over his ex.
oh god, it's true.
And it's like,
It
we
really
need Team
is.
Silent to be together again. Like, Team. Do people forget how much people hated Silent Hill 3 when it came out?
Oh, people despised it, and also partially because they
Yeah.
didn't like Heather. They felt like Heather was a weak protagonist, and then they finally actually played the game and realized,
Yeah.
holy shit, Heather Mason is a great protagonist.
We'll put it this way: they finally started looking up from her chest to realize that she was actually speaking words.
Yeah. Oh, no. See, the complaint back in the day was, I don't feel that Heather is sexy enough. Like, she doesn't appeal as a female protagonist. I remember this all vividly, by the way.
Of course.
People felt like she wasn't appealing visually, therefore that she was going to be a poor protagonist? Is that how that works?
Yes, that's exactly how it works.
Ah,
I love it. I love it.
love it.
I had
Oh, go ahead.
I had recently listened to a podcast that pretty much described it perfectly. If you look at the evolution of Silent Hill games, Konami has listened to the complaints of every single of the Silent Hill fan base, and it has made the game progressively worse. You know, Silent Hill 1 came out and people liked it. It really wasn't meant to be like a major psychological thrill. It was just kind of meant to be this like throwback to Jacob's Ladder and you know, other similar like horror movies. And Harry was just meant to be an ordinary guy without real gun training. Then
Everyman.
yeah. Then Silent Hill 2 came out and they decided to kind of make it a spiritual sequel as opposed to a direct one. People didn't like that it wasn't a direct sequel. They said, "Oh, this is great, but where's Harry? Why isn't Harry or Sybil or Cheryl in the game?" So Konami took that advice and made 3, its own game. Made it a direct sequel. People saw 3 and said, "This is ridiculous. Where's my connection to Silent Hill 2? I really like Pyramid Head. Where's Pyramid Head? I don't get why Pyramid Head can't be in here."
Don't.
So
Do not mention Red Pyramid here.
So Silent Hill 4 came out and they had more connections to Silent Hill 2, and the combat system was a little different, and people hated the room when it came out. They said, "This is weird. The combat system is terrible. Remake the combat system." So Homecoming came out, and Homecoming,
Origins came first.
yeah, Origins did come first, but they were developing them at the same time. So
Yeah.
Origins tried to be more like Silent Hill 2. Origins was the closest they came to remaking Silent Hill 2, and it made people realize just why we did not need them to remake a Silent Hill 2. So Homecoming came out, and Homecoming had this real emphasis on combat, and people realized, like, wait a minute, combat in a Silent Hill game is completely unnecessary. Then people complained about that, saying, the combat, we just eliminate combat altogether and make it take place in Silent Hill and make it be about the characters we know and love. So they made Shattered Memories, which was literally that. And then people said, this game is too linear, give us we want a Silent Hill that can also be a kind of have free roaming elements. So they did with Downpour. And, they've listened to the fans so much, and
Yeah.
look at what we've gotten.
What we've gotten.
Until, they kind of said, let's throw out all of this pointless nostalgia that's only weighing our games down, and begin, like, pure innovation. And I kind of get that with PT. The only thing that PT kind of reminds me of is the first-person sections from Silent Hill 4. And that's a good thing, because that to me was the scariest moments in the entirety of Silent Hill. Everything else is kind of unnerving more than scary.
It's funny because I actually, like, I mean, I watched, this was after I knew it was Silent Hills, of course, and I got a lot more Silent Hill vibes from it, because, I mean, you had, shit, I can't even remember any of them, but I remember watching it, and I'm like, wait, this is very Silent Hill, like especially the handprints on the walls and all of that, like, there were a lot of pieces of it that kind of made it very Silent Hill in nature.
I see the
And
vibes
yet
I got.
also not at the same time.
Yeah, the vibes I got from it were more Fatal Frame and Jacob's Ladder. Particularly
Yeah.
Jacob's Ladder, the influence in that game is really felt, and that's a really. As soon as they announced that Del Toro was involved, that's the thing that made me most excited, because if you look at Pan's Labyrinth, he was clearly influenced um, by Jacob's Ladder, which is the game, it's a movie that's directly responsible for Silent Hill's feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I'm basically like, this guy is influenced by the same things that influenced, our precious Team Silent. We should be more excited about this.
I really want to talk about PT, but I have not played or seen anything yet. I'm holding off right now.
Yeah, there's actually, it's funny because my friend told me that there are actually 2 videos for the playable demo. I wish I had a PS4 to actually play it on.
So far, every
But
single
apparently,
person who's played it, myself included, has noted different things in it.
yeah.
Particularly in regards to the puzzles, like, the puzzles in that game are really tough. I didn't get half of them. I played it for about 3 hours before I fully beat it.
Yeah, I mean, it was very tough, like, puzzles. I'm not even sure. Like, we found the answers, and I'm not entirely sure what the puzzle was in the beginning. Because I know one of the major puzzle was trying to find the pieces of the picture.
Those ones you just have to look carefully around the room and you'll see them. But no, the biggest puzzle in that game is getting a baby to cry 3 times.
Oh, see,
Basically, once you, cause Jay, I know I don't know if how much of it you actually know about, but the
Nothing. But go ahead.
the demo is literally one room looping over and over.
It's a hallway.
Yeah.
It's a single hallway and a bathroom, which you can't even get access to until you loop through a couple of times. And then after you get through like half of the demo, after half of the playable teaser, time starts progressing. Because for the first part of it, you're actually stuck at 11:59 p.m. And then at a certain point, everything changes and you start going into midnight.
And then once midnight happens, then you can start getting attacked.
Yeah.
In the hallway.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time to get there, and arguably, you could argue the demo ends, before that. That is just extra. So in order to actually beat the demo, you have to find
You have to find the pictures of the pieces of the picture.
Yeah, you have to, and you'll notice that randomly after doing things, sometimes a baby will cry. And if you can get a baby to cry 3 times, a phone will ring and a voice on it will say, "You've been chosen." And then if you exit the game at that point, the demo that it basically announces that it is a Silent Hill game plays.
Yeah.
It's the same demo, it's the same trailer we've all seen with Norman Reedus, but
I have to admit, the whatchamacallit, this music in that scene started to make me cry. Because it was just it was such a good callback to that Silent Hill music, it was perfect.
Yeah.
It would be nice if I've actually, I have stayed away from PT in its entirety. I have not seen anything related to it. I know everything about its release and its, conception, but I stayed away from it because I almost want to experience the game from a completely fresh mindset. I don't want to know anything about it. I don't know.
For Silent Hills?
for the
the demo basically is what she's saying.
Or
Yeah.
do you want to? I'm trying to understand because I'm confused. Either, do you want to experience
The demo.
teaser by yourself, or do you want to
the
experience
entirety? Actually, I want to play the demo myself, but I also want to
Yeah.
experience the actual game when it is released without any
Yeah,
sort of previous knowledge.
Kojima has come out and said that this isn't actually a demo. It's not a demo at all.
It's more of like an
a
introduction.
playable teaser. It's a
Yeah.
teaser. It's literally just a teaser, and you have the movie teasers that really give you nothing into the plot. So that's what a teaser is. It doesn't give you much. It's just really
It's feel.
to whet your appetite. Yeah, it's supposed to give you the feel. And so while I'm trying to read into the teaser, I'm also trying to not keeping that in mind.
The
Because I
teaser,
feel like there's a
the
little-
teaser stands alone really well.
Yeah, it really does. You have like a complete story there, or kind of complete story because you have the story of the guy whose father killed his entire family.
There are characters and there are yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you have the house actually morphing because of what the father did. And you have the dead baby in the bathroom. You have the mother taking care of the baby by attacking you every time you get close to it. You have, the gouge it out because I'm guessing what that means is that she was shot in the eye, and they wanted to gouge out the bullet. Like, there's just a lot of little things. And it just really gives me faith in Kojima's. And
See, I personally thought that was an abortion reference myself.
Gouge it out.
Yeah, cause that is not a healthy looking baby.
No, it's not, and I completely believe that it is a fetus/aborted baby.
But it doesn't. That's the great thing about it is it doesn't have to tell you everything.
Yeah. Although I have to admit, I really want to go through it again because for a lot of it, I actually was listening to it without your headphones on, which is a mistake. Because
it's different. I actually saw the video that you saw too. It's different.
Yeah.
Like I played it last night just sitting in a dark room with in front of my TV, literally sitting in front of a 42-inch TV, just waiting, and I tell you, first time in years I've actually been afraid and
yeah.
And
And I mean, games
just so good.
Yeah, it really it managed to set that atmosphere, and the great part about it was that nothing actually happened until really halfway through, and I mean it did such a good job at setting the atmosphere, especially in the beginning you have all of the hall lights are on, you don't even have the flashlight yet, and it does such a good job. And let's just give a round of applause to the Fox engine, because I mean, honestly, who can say how much they love watching those dust particles settling in front of the screen?
It was great.
Let's shift topics from PT to the Evil Within.
Yeah.
Because I think that is something definitely worth talking about.
Give me one moment. My computer's about to die, so.
I want to believe it's really a toss-up between this will be the savior of survival horror, or this will single-handedly destroy survival horror, or at least it was that until Silent Hill got released, and the teaser got released, and a lot of people were kind of speculating that The Evil Within could potentially be another Resident Evil 4, but to me, it doesn't really seem that way. What about you guys?
The atmosphere is definitely completely different from a Resident Evil 4. 4 knew it was going to be action from the bat. Yeah, this you still have you can clearly tell what what horror movies influenced Mikami when he was
Yeah.
making it. Like, hmm,
Oh man.
yeah, it's definitely like. Also, Marissa's kicking my ass.
You can do it. I suck balls at Toho-Mania, so good on you.
What happened?
We're talking Toho.
Oh, we're talking Toho? Okay.
I am super excited for The Evil Within. I even sent it an email in their contest to get a free copy and everything. Like, I'm psyched. I really, really, really am looking forward to it because from what I've seen of it, it really, really does a lot right. Like,
Yeah.
atmosphere, graphics, just intuitive
A lot of
gameplay.
it is like done right, and it gives me a lot of hope, but it also gets me really scared because every time I've been watching it, I've been waiting for this since it was announced. I've been watching every single trailer that's been coming out,
Yeah.
and the last few games that I've done that for have been horrible disappointments.
Yeah.
And
Which ones?
I fear, huh?
Said like which ones?
Dishonored, Last of Us, and Watch Dogs.
Watch Dogs.
Those are the three that I've sat on watching everything, and I was really excited for all of them. And then the games came out, and I was horribly disappointed. And the problem with that is if that happens with The Evil Within, I'm worried that it's going to be
The death of
the end.
Survivor.
It's going to be the end of survival horror.
You didn't like
And
Dishonored?
I didn't really like it.
I
found it too easy.
I thought it was like quick aside, but the thing I loved most about that game was you literally got the game you wanted. No matter how, if you wanted if you wanted to play a no kill and really care about the backstory, you could get that, but
yeah, it really molded to whatever you wanted, and it was really nice. That one really wasn't a horrible disappointment, but there was still something about it that just really just put me off.
okay. I do definitely agree with Watch Dogs though.
I think most human
Dogs.
beings agree with Watch Dogs.
Which is really sad, and I really wish that wasn't the case. And yet, here we
And
are.
yet, what can you do? I personally think my favorite feature of The Evil Within right now is just the sheer use of environmental interactability, interactiveness rather, that just comes out with hiding and with using everything around you to your advantage. And I think that survival horror has completely forgot about that aspect of gameplay. Like, it's not all about, what weapons you find or how much ammo you have or whether you can get an herb in time to survive to the next, level. But it's really about using the stuff around you to just make it through that level and make it to whatever your goal is, whether it's safety or just pure survival.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of the Shinji Mikami that helped make Sweet Home.
Yeah. Early Shinji Mikami?
And in other words, like that Capcom team.
Yeah. They're long gone now.
Well, even so, I mean, like Resident Evil initially began as a Sweet Home remake.
That's true. And Resident Evil was really all about atmosphere as well. A lot of old school quote-unquote survival horror games started off as atmosphere games as opposed to trying to be games that would appeal to the masses, and then ended up becoming exactly that.
Yeah.
You can even see Square Enix mooching off of the atmosphere with Parasite Eve, and they lost it in Parasite Eve 2, but they tried really hard. But
they sure made an attempt.
They made an attempt, but yeah, I mean, it became infectious. It really did. Silent Hill got it from Resident Evil. Parasite Eve got it from Silent Hill, the initial, and it was just like a huge, really catchy sort of look for games. And then at some point, survival horror didn't like lost its appeal, I guess, because it didn't have big guns and also Marines.
Yeah.
I'm not
Which
sure.
I find fun.
Hmm?
Which I find funny, especially where not Silent Hill, Resident Evil ended up.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
I'm guessing a lot of what was wrong with Homecoming was that it was trying way too hard to be Resident Evil and
Yeah.
appeal to that audience, and it just didn't work. Like, that's not what Silent Hill is.
But that's the thing about most modern day survival horror games is that they're trying too hard to be Call of Duty and to be a game that they're not. Like, okay, let's broach this topic before it goes untalked about throughout this entire conversation. The Last of Us was not survival horror.
No, it
not
absolutely was
survival
not.
horror.
It was cinematic, but it was not survival horror.
Beautiful, beautiful cinematography, absolutely gorgeous,
Yeah.
great storytelling, pretty memorable characters. Well, you know, that's debatable, but I thought that for its use of cinematography, it had nice storytelling to go along with it. So, you know, it fit.
Yeah.
Most of the characters were memorable. Just kidding. 2 of the characters were memorable. Tess kind of is easy to forget about, but you really got like a nice dosage of a game that really wanted to tell a story but had to sell, and that's the problem. It surrendered what could have potentially have been a good survival horror game for action survival, for something that isn't even within that genre, because
It would have been so much better if they just took out the zombie part, like, or whatever the hell it was.
it's not even. I thought that the problem was you walked into an area in The Last of Us and there were immediately waist-high blockades. You knew it was going to be an area that you were going to get shot in at by humans, not by enemies. And even with the presence of quote-unquote zombies or infected in that game, it felt like things were purposely set up for you to go to. So it was very streamlined. It wasn't challenging because I knew point A would lead me to safety, point B would lead me to disaster. Like, you never really felt threatened in that game because everything was almost handed to you.
Having scary looking enemies does not mean you're going to have a scary game.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, the clickers are goddamn great design
Oh yeah.
horror monsters, but
Sometimes a good horror monster is humans themselves. And, I mean, just to Silent Hill 2 form like that, that was the enemy in Silent Hill 2, was James's self.
yeah.
And so, like, yeah, but then they decided, no, we're gonna try to focus more on, you know, all of this other stuff. I just didn't end up liking it. I actually remember the exact point in which I gave up on the game. It was a point where you had to go in the underground, like the subway tunnels, the abandoned subway tunnels, and there were like cars that were stationed all around, and there was police looking for you, and you had to sneak past the police.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and there were spores all around, and you had the gas masks on. That was the point where I gave up on the game, and I was like, this isn't what I was looking for.
That's really early on in the game, though, to be fair. But
To be fair, yes, but at that point, you kind of have a feel for the game.
it's troubling because I can't say that that's an accurate depiction of the game, because the game after that actually becomes way more open world, and you do get to see a lot of its better features afterwards, but to introduce the audience to a tone that the game isn't going to stay consistent with was its major downfall.
Yes.
I mean, you want to bring your audience exactly what they ordered. And
Yes.
even if you start out the game in a way that isn't that, you have to ease them into it. You have to like somehow signify to them, this is going to get scarier.
Yeah.
In The Last of Us, we're still talking about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. In The Last of Us, we're introduced to running as a concept, survival as a concept, and that's great. But you run from human beings. You run from armored people. You run from people with machine guns. You run from people who are trying to keep you down. You run from the man. That's The Last of Us, until you finally escape the city and you're like, oh, there was actually a biological horror game behind all of this. And there it
Yeah.
is. it's really, really like hit or miss with that game. I mean, at some points I really felt like I was getting what I paid for, and at others I just didn't know. I didn't know if I was getting into the right game. I thought maybe I was playing it wrong.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very hit or miss.
It's not by all means. It's not a bad game. It's a great game. I mean, I don't love it, but I did like what I played of it as a standalone game. But
Yeah.
I felt like it was trying to be the resurgence of survival horror through cinematography in video games, and it kind of fell flat.
It has
Yeah.
it has survival elements, ironically not in regards to horror, but more like, we gotta survive, make it through the winter, and make it in these areas. Like it had
Which is
that
also good.
it had that kind of survival, but I sure as hell wouldn't call it horror.
Oh yeah.
No.
It's a damn shame too, because I thought that when I was watching, the trailers for it, when I was watching its conception happen, I thought that The Last of Us was going to be like the savior of, storytelling and survival horror in video games. And I refer to this all the time. I thought it was going to be Cormac McCarthy's The Road, the game, and I was super excited because I thought, finally, for once, we could see a game with minimal action that could still be scary and still be intuitive.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to intuitive gameplay, and what I got was just a typical leveling system and upgrade system.
I knew it was going to always be because it's Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog are great game makers, but they are a very cinematic team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They really aren't going to make, it's not their kind of game to make.
It's not. I mean, again, did we really need a definitive edition, maybe a year after the game's release?
I mean, they did it for Tomb Raider, same time frame.
I have mixed feelings about Tomb Raider after thinking about it, but we'll get to that in another podcast.
Yeah.
But I think that as far as the game, great, it fits the fact that it's a very, cinema-heavy game. It's all about camera angles, it's all about the beauty of an environment, etc., etc.
Oh yeah.
But I also feel like people are not buying it because it's pretty at the same time. I feel like people are actually investing in this game because of its gameplay and calling it survival horror.
Trying
Trying to, yes, more appropriately.
to.
It's just tough because I don't hate The Last of Us. I really don't. It's not that I dislike it, but I wasn't thrilled to see that it's becoming the face of survival horror, even though it's completely not a survival horror game.
See, I felt Dark Souls and Demon Souls was even more of a horror game.
Yeah. Actually.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, it really forced you to think your way through situations, and it was very clever in the way that it did certain things.
it's just hard because, again, it's referring to what is survival horror, what are the elements of survival horror, what are the necessary features of survival horror, and as we've talked about, it's really environment, it's mood, it's theme, it's camera angles. Camera angles are important. It's not something you can just forget about, because if we look, I mean, what would you say are the parents of survival horror? Because we all want to say Silent Hill at our core, but we know that Silent Hill didn't start survival horror.
Sweet Home and Alone in the Dark.
Yeah, I was going to say Alone in the Dark. I unfortunately haven't gotten to experience much of Sweet Home, but I've heard nothing but good things about it.
I would even go as far as say a lot of the text-based, like, if you go and like research, there are an untold number of these text-based, like, kind of adventure Cthulhu and Lovecraft-inspired adventure novels, and I think that because if you really like read some of them, they spend a whole lot of time, most of their time, describing the room, describing the events in really scary, horrid detail.
Yeah.
I think those have a bigger impact on um on you know, horror games today.
Yeah.
Why
They
doesn't
they
anyone talk about Eternal Darkness?
Mm,
sadly, I still don't think a lot of people have played it.
yeah. It's
Again, it was
very.
on GameCube.
Huh?
It was on GameCube, so that probably explains it.
I
No, GameCube was very successful, so. I mean, it was just not very well, like, put out. Like, it's very hard to find a copy nowadays, although the game to find is really close.
Oh god, yeah.
the GameCube had a untold number of really good atmospheric, scary
Yeah.
games. And really between remake, Killer 7.
Oh,
Killer 7
Seven.
Killer 7 had, you know, the Heaven Smiles were really frightening, like designed beasts, and they were invisible, and you know, some of them would they were unnerving.
Yeah.
That's what they reminded me of. The Regenerators in RE4 are Heaven Smiles reskinned.
That is true. That is very true. We might have to include a picture just for reference for anyone who.
I'll include it in the
again,
video description.
yeah.
But yeah, my god, like they were terrifying. And though you know Suda 51 graphics are often like cubic, they still managed to be scary.
Yeah.
They were pretty, you know, intimidating. Oh my god, I love Killer 7, you guys. But back
I
on
have to say,
topic.
I haven't even played Killer 7. It's a game I've wanted to play for a while now.
It's definitely worth picking up. To all of you listening, Killer 7 is amazing, and you should all play it if you have a
But
GameCube.
Suda 51 is trying to get back again into it.
I don't know where Suda 51 is going now.
It's,
I'm-
it's going far away. But that's something for another podcast.
Yeah.
But it's tough. It's tough seeing if survival horror is going to make a comeback. I think that too many people these days are playing video games that have pretty graphics and over-the-shoulder gameplay, or you know, first-person shooters. It's tough, but I think that there's a niche, you know, genre out there that has yet to be, you know, explored. Like we all know what survival horror is, but why not expand upon survival horror and make it different? You know,
Yeah.
it's going to happen. I think that these games are definitely going to breathe life back into survival horror. They're not only going to breathe life back into them, but make them a little more, a little less actual cultish. Because a lot of people refer to, you know, Silent Hill fans as very culty people because they all, you know.
They absolutely are.
Oh,
Yeah.
they totally are.
Oh, they totally are, and it's 99% because of nostalgia, really.
Honestly, here's my thing about nostalgia. You make a good enough game, nostalgia will follow. Like, don't make a game purely for the nostalgia. If you make a good game, if you make a game with, you know, that's Silent Hill, you're going to have the Silent Hill nostalgia with it.
A lot of people have given. Oh, sorry. A lot of people have given, you know, the American teams that have made Silent Hill games a lot of flack, and honestly, people don't realize how impossible of a task those teams were given.
Yeah.
They want, because the Silent Hill fan base wants games that are innovative and unique, but still have that Silent Hill feel.
Yeah.
It's at the point where they could literally remake 2, and I don't think people would be happy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh god, I'm all for clinging to nostalgia, but I think it's time that we evolve games because, okay, here's a great example of people not being able to get over nostalgia. Metal Gear fans who hated MGS4 when it came out. They despised MGS4. They were like, this is it, this is the downfall of Metal Gear. But now you look at them and they praise MGS4 to the high heavens. It's simply like, it's a gut reaction to things evolving. People will deny that change and they'll hate it at first, but they'll grow to like it in eventuality. Then we kind of saw them come back and complain about Peace Walker and now complain about Metal Gear Solid 5, but I've rarely ever seen complaints about Metal Gear Solid 5, so...
Yeah.
I think letting things take their natural course in development is totally fine. There's a limit to how much you should develop something before you should change the title of it in terms of franchise development, i.e. with Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5, they should have made it a separate game series entirely. Resident Evil 4 less so, but RE5 definitely.
Oh yeah.
But, you know, you've gotta both embody nostalgia and also use it to grow into a different series, because if you make the same game over and over again, Call of Duty, you're going... I mean, we can't really use Call of Duty as an example because it's a successful game, but you're going to get...
I would argue Madden and like the FIFA games are a lot more...
Reskinning old games.
Because they are literally the same game.
It's hard to say because people still buy those games. I almost wanted to use... oh, here's a perfect example. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Literally nothing about the gameplay changed, and look at how poorly it did in comparison to the other games before it. Especially Silver and Gold. The remakes, at least, I believe, that came out beforehand.
No, they came out after.
Oh, they came out after? Well, sorry.
Yeah.
The remakes that came out after actually sold really well in comparison to Diamond and Pearl because they changed gameplay. Sorry about that. I'm not a humongous Pokemon fan. My personal favorites are Sapphire and Ruby for anyone who cares. And yes, I am super excited about the remakes coming out. I personally really liked X and Y. I thought that X and Y was the step that we needed in Pokemon. But again, if you keep remaking the same game over and over again, you'll notice the people who are nostalgic for it will continue buying it, but the people who aren't will not really be as invested in it because they're not, you know, Pokemon's a tough one. It's the same game over and over again, yet it still manages to be welcoming, and
it's the hero's journey in a better form.
In a simplistic form.
It's the hero's journey in a simplistic form that kids can enjoy, and that's what's really so amazing about it. That's what it is. It's the hero's journey.
It's funny because, oh, sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I don't really...
I was going to say that, it's funny because I heard a lot of younger children, or at least the children that I was exposed to, say that X and Y felt like it was less inclusive. Not in those exact words, it was more like, I didn't have as much... Yeah, I actually heard a lot of kids feeling like it was a more adult game. Especially my family members who played X and Y, and also, Black and White, felt like it was a lot of story and less, you know, like beating up small Pokemon, like, you know?
Yeah.
Which is great and all for the adult players who actually want story out of their Pokemon games, but it's like, you know, what audience do we cater to now, and are we doing a good job of feeding to both simultaneously?
X and Y might as well have been called Red 2 and Blue 2.
Yeah.
Because they were definitely trying to invoke that feel.
Yeah, I mean, my mother hasn't played a Pokemon game since Gold and Silver, and she picked up X and Y treasures and 2DS just for it, and she adores it. And, you know, that's kind of part of the audience that they're going for, because a lot of kids will buy Pokemon just for that, but how many adults will go out and buy a 2DS just to buy a Pokemon?
You'd be surprised quite a bit. I mean,
I'm sure.
If they were exposed to Pokemon as a kid, the likeliness of them jumping in on X and Y is actually a lot higher. Because, as you all know, a lot of kids these days are playing Call of Duty and not playing Pokemon. And I think Nintendo's realizing that, you know, their younger audience has kind of left them for Microsoft. So they're catering to the adult audiences now. A little bit more. I even noticed that with, like, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, like, you know, adding in Fire Emblem Awakening characters was like they're definitely appealing to more adult audiences now because not many young people play Fire Emblem Awakening, so
They're aiming at the young adult audience with that,
yeah.
rather than the actual adult audience.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm thinking maybe like 18 and up for like quote unquote adult audiences, but even so, I've never met a young Fire Emblem Awakening fan. Like, not even once. Most of the people who play Fire Emblem Awakening are like older Fujoshi who like want. You
Well,
know,
because it's a strategy game by nature. It's not necessarily kid friendly.
which is funny because a lot of us play. Well, I don't know. I'm speaking for myself probably, but I played Fire Emblem the original like when I was really young, and I had a great time playing it. Which I also didn't have Call of Duty and Resident Evil at the time. I was playing. It was a simpler time, but but yeah, I felt like kids in general were just less picky about gameplay back in the day. They would pick up anything that had cool graphics or looked cool, or maybe had some fancy anime characters with a sword on it. Like, that was my thing. I didn't care if it was strategy. It looked cool and it seemed cool and I enjoyed it even though I sucked at it, so I don't know. Maybe our tastes as a generation have changed. Maybe.
A little.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
A little bit.
I know it's definitely apparent. Again, survival horror. You'll notice that most of the people who enjoy survival horror are all people who are older. Like, you don't see many younger fans of survival horror.
I mean, people who were playing survival horror for, you know, however long.
Which is a damn shame, mind you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am quite excited to see all of these games released. I am excited to play them, and I am excited to see people talking about survival horror and talking about The Last of Us.
Personally, I think this is like, I think we're gonna see a renaissance of survival horror from these games because there really isn't any action horror alternative. We haven't seen like there isn't like a Dead Space being talked about alongside these. I mean, I guess the closest one you can talk about is the game From Software is working on, Project Beast.
Yeah.
But even that, it's not really a horror game. That's still pretty much a, you know, Dark Souls-esque. Actually, you know what? I take it back. There is that, I forget the name of the game, but the new one that Suda51 is working on.
Oh, oh my god. Something dead?
Yeah.
Something is death? I don't know. Hold on.
I thought that one looked really interesting.
There we go.
What happened?
Let It Die. We're talking about Let It Die.
Oh, sorry. No, my signal went cut out, so I was.
Okay. I mean, that one looked pretty scary, but again, that still looked very like you clearly look like a guy who can get shit done, as opposed to, you know, Harry Mason, whose number one trait in the freaking manual for Silent Hill was he's a writer. He can't like fire a gun well. He has no gun training.
Hello, that's survival horror. A lot of people go in and ask, you know, oh god, let's refer to something that happened on Twitter. Someone asked me to define survival horror since I was saying that The Last of Us wasn't survival horror, and I said that the feeling of confidence in a dangerous situation immediately indicates you're probably not playing a survival horror game. Like that, you should not feel confident in yourself in survival horror. You should feel terrified to be in that situation.
Yes.
And to refer to
It's the level of preparation for the challenge at hand.
Yeah, it really is. And even with the Evil Within, like that whole, I know a lot of people are really picky about chase scenes and being chased in games, and I thought that it was cleverly done in the Evil Within, and that feeling of helplessness that comes with being chased is a real fear that people can relate to.
Yeah, it's a relatable fear.
Which is, again, an important feature of survival horror. You don't want anyone to feel isolated by the topics you're handling. You want to be able to get them scared. You want them to be able to know, you know, this is it. This is a fear that we know we're getting under your skin with.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? I could be just making things up, but I think it's pretty earnestly a sign that survival horror needs to go back to its roots a little bit.
The thing is that survival horror needs to go back to its roots, but it also needs to expand.
It needs innovation.
Like, it needs innovation while also keeping in mind where they came from.
It's less. I'd actually argue opposite. I don't think it needs to go back to its roots. I think it needs to drop nostalgia and
Yes.
focus on something new.
Which is what I'm hoping for with the new Silent Hill game and with Kojima and Del Toro heading it. Because I'm hoping, they'll just go through the story rather than for, all of these callbacks to the old games and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling I got from PT.
It's troubling because I want to see an almost Bravely Default, but for silent horror. Like, I thought that Bravely Default was a nice breath of fresh air when it came to JRPGs, because it was while it was nostalgic in terms of presentation, it still had a really creative battle system, it had really nice characters, it had a story. No? Not so much?
I think it was pure fine-toned nostalgia.
Bravely Default.
110%.
Yeah, that was the whole purpose, but I think that it used nostalgia as a weapon against its own audience, because there are a ton of people who picked up Bravely Default who have never played an old school, Final Fantasy game.
They haven't played pre-Final Fantasy even 6.
6, yeah.
Game. Because, Final Fantasy 5 was really the last time you saw the job system in place.
Well, aside from 10 game, but that was a different. Yeah, that was a dress sphere.
That was the dress sphere, yeah.
But it's troubling because I want to see that, and I want to see a game, a survival horror game that goes back to its roots so well that it almost becomes a new either genre or game entirely, or I want to see something so different that people are interested in that difference or interested in that change of pace with survival horror. And I'm not sure which one I want to see more, because the nostalgia loving person in me wants to see that Bravely Default-esque breath of life, but there's that alternative of let's actually get something new in place.
Yeah, when it comes to, I'm gonna use Silent Hill as an example here, because Silent Hill, the problem with a lot of the later games is that they forgot what their roots were. Because in Silent Hill, the entire point of Silent Hill is that it's a town of repentance. But later on in the game, you really forget that even is the case in a lot of situations. What? I'm trying to even think. What would Henry really be repenting for? What would Travis be repenting for? There are just a lot of situations where it seems they kind of forgot what that was.
God, yeah.
I feel like I'm not articulating this well enough, but...
No, you are. It's just hard to say, because while we can sit here and talk about what we want out of these games, no developer is going to sit and listen to our podcast and be like, yes, these people have intellectual opinions on our games that should be acknowledged, as much as I would like that to be the case. But yeah, it's really a matter of what are we getting out of these games, and what are they supposed to be sort of giving us as people? And I can definitely blame my horrible fear of being watched and being stalked on Silent Hill, so...
Yeah.
I think we all just need to kind of learn to appreciate this genre more, I think, because for a while there, for a long while actually, us survival horror fans got nothing. We did not get anything for our genre, for our interests.
We had to literally go to the next best thing, which was Dead Space and Revelations. Yeah. Oh yeah, and RPG Maker horror games too.
Yeah, which are look, for anyone listening, they are amazing. But as far as big hits go, we did not get a single big hit for maybe 6, 7 years, not even, maybe longer. How long has it been since Dead Space was released? Because that was like the last attempt at a survival horror game. Hold on.
It's been a while.
Oh yeah, because I remember playing it when the Xbox 360 came out. 2008. It's been 6 years since Dead Space was released. And Dead Space wasn't even a survival horror game, so I can only imagine it had to be maybe 8, 9.
Easily.
And that's being cautious.
We had various other types of games that tried to be survival horror.
You had like your Outlast.
Yeah, like we had our Outlast, we had our Dead Space, we had our Last of Us. We had those games. They happened, but they weren't hitting the nail where it needed to be hit for survival horror.
They weren't scratching the itch.
Yeah. I'd argue Amnesia would probably be about the last survival horror release.
And even then, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I can't even call Amnesia survival horror because
I can call the first Amnesia survival horror because you had a quantifiable amount of, lighter fluid and there was
the sanity meter.
for a game to me to be classified as survival horror, tension has to exist. Tension has to exist outside of scariness, and for like Silent Hill, that tension came from ammo and health and combat. In in PT, it comes from you got to make sure you don't get attacked by the ghost. In Amnesia, you only had a very specific amount of health, sanity, and lighter fluid and tinder boxes. It was absolutely destroyed in A Machine for Pigs because there was no tension in that game whatsoever, and that's why I hate it. But even in Outlast, like I said, the tension is mostly destroyed because you get as many batteries as you want once you learn to exploit the system.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the first Amnesia definitely had, I would call that survival horror more so than anything else.
It was psychological horror more than survival horror, honestly.
Yeah, but it was still, to me, I would still classify it as a survival horror game because you had to have tension in order to survive.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard because I consider myself more of a psychological horror fan than a survival horror fan, but you really can't have psychological horror without survival.
Yeah.
Especially, like, in a video game, you can't. I mean, books and movies and whatnot, you definitely can, but in games, you need to have that survival horror aspect involved in order to even get that psychological horror aspect across.
Guys, I just want my favorite genre to come back. That's all. I'm holding off with Mass Effect, but one day I will crawl back from the cave I live in and reclaim survival horror as we know it. Because for a while I thought it was dead.
Psychological horror.
And psych horror too. I'm all for either, but it's really just a matter of like, hey,
Can we get something back, please?
can we get something that isn't a first-person or third-person shooter slash hack and slash that is actually fairly interesting in terms of writing back, please? Because while I'm all for those games, it's just, there's a time when my favorite genre as a kid kind of is dead.
Yeah.
It's a damn shame.
Yeah, it is.
Plus, it's such an open-ended genre too. There are a ton of things we could do with it, but I don't think we're being creative enough at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a real shame. And also, I'm reading Fiji Cat's comics, so I'm sorry if I'm laughing.
It's all good.
But yeah. That was good. I got a bit of perspective.
Yeah, we're about hitting the hour half mark, so
Jeez. We were saying 40 minutes?
yeah, I want to see how, well, it's a topic that we all feel pretty passionately about, and honestly, I could keep talking for another 20 minutes about how, comparing PT to the game D, but I think we've hit, at least for one night, I think we've hit a pretty good mark.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead. Is there any parting words before we end for?
I will be writing an article about my 5 favorite survival horror games. I was supposed to do this last week, but I had a guest over, so I couldn't. Shout out to Evie. I will be talking about games like Haunting Ground, which is amazing for anyone who hasn't played it, and something I name dropped earlier, Eternal Darkness, Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 3, etc. So keep an eye out for it. They're not going to be one of those top 5 lists, but it's definitely going to try and be more of a, hey, these are kind of games that define the survival horror genre. So check it out. That's relevant, and it'll be up on a Hip Hop Gamer, and I can link it on my Twitter, which is Backlace, again, if anyone's interested.
Well, probably by the time this video gets compiled and gets shipped out to YouTube, I'll be able to put a link up to it or something like that.
Okay. Alright, cool. Sounds great.
Okay. Avery, any parting words, plugs, anything like that?
I mean, I just really want my 2 favorite genres back. That's all I really want. That's all any of this really ends up in. Yeah.
I think that's what we all want. And of course, I'm Tom Bear Pigman on Twitter. Avery is Living X Paradox on Twitter. Jay is Backlace. I'll be linking all of our Twitters up in the YouTube video, and you can always find me at twitch.tv/bearpigman, which is where we recorded this right now. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Well, have a great night, and thank you all for listening to our first episode of FP4. Alright, have a great night.